Hey there, History Wanderer. Welcome back to another journey through time. Tonight, we're traveling somewhere most history books skip right over, to a dusty workshop in ancient China, where you're about to witness the birth of a weapon so devastating, so revolutionary, that kingdoms trembled at the mere whisper of its name. Yet somehow, it's been almost completely forgotten by modern times. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from tonight? What time is it there? Are you in bed already, or still winding down from your day? Let me know, because tonight, you're not just a listener, you're a protagonist. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, pull those blankets up, because tonight, you're transported back 2,400 years to the Warring States period of ancient China, around 400 BCE. You're a young engineer's apprentice in the state of Chu. Your hands are calloused, your back aches from 12-hour days in the workshop, and you're about to help create something that will change warfare forever. This isn't a story about glory or heroism. It's about survival, ingenuity, and the mundane, brutal reality of being the person who builds the machines that tear down walls and decide the fate of nations. They never taught you this in school. They never told you what it actually felt like to stand beside a weapon that could hurl a stone the weight of 3 men over 200 paces. They never mentioned the sound it made, the smell of hemp rope burning from friction, or the way your entire body trembled when 60 soldiers pulled the ropes in perfect unison. Tonight, you'll experience it all. You wake before dawn in the craftsman's quarters of Chu's military compound. The mat beneath you is thin, woven from rough hemp that leaves impressions on your skin. Your back aches. It always aches these days. 3 months ago, Master Zhou selected you from among 40 apprentices to work on his secret project. You still don't understand why he chose you. You're decent with measurements and can read the engineering scrolls, but so can others. Perhaps it was the way you questioned the design of the siege ladder last spring, suggesting a different angle for the supports. Master Zhou had stared at you for a long moment, before nodding slowly. Since then, you've been sequestered in Workshop 7, forbidden from discussing your work with anyone outside the team. The morning bell hasn't rung yet, but you can't sleep. Through the paper window, you see the first grey hints of dawn. Your mind keeps returning to yesterday's test. The prototype frame collapsed under tension, sending splinters of oak shooting across the courtyard. One piece struck Chen, the carpenter's assistant, in the shoulder. He screamed. You all stood frozen, watching blood seep through his tunic. Master Zhou simply made notes on his scroll, muttering about load distribution and pivot points. Chen was taken away. You haven't seen him since. Today, Master Zhou promised, you'll attempt the first true test with the reinforced frame. If it fails again, the project might be abandoned. The Duke of Chu grows impatient. Resources are limited. 3 other engineering teams compete for funding. You dress in your work tunic, splash cold water on your face from the clay basin, and step out into the compound. The air is cold, your breath mists. Other craftsmen shuffle toward the workshops, silent ghosts in the pre-dawn darkness. You're all thinking the same thing. Another day closer to the siege season. Another day to prove your worth, or be forgotten. Workshop 7 sits at the compound's edge, deliberately isolated. As you approach, you see lantern light already flickering through the gaps in the wooden walls. Master Zhou never sleeps, or so it seems. The old man is always here, hunched over scrolls or running his gnarled fingers along wooden beams, testing for weak points. You push open the heavy door. The smell hits you immediately. Sawdust, hemp oil, the acrid tang of heated metal. The workshop is enormous, nearly 40 paces long and half as wide. The ceiling soars high enough for the prototype to stand fully assembled. And there it is, the machine. You've been building it for 3 months, but seeing it still steals your breath. It looks like a giant wooden letter A lying on its side, with a massive beam mounted on an axle between 2 upright frames. Dozens of ropes hang from one end of the beam, while the other end cradles a sling made of woven hemp. The entire structure is as tall as 3 men, and built from oak beams thicker than your torso. Yesterday's damaged frame has been replaced overnight. You wonder how many carpenters work through the darkness to achieve this. Master Joe stands beside the machine, one hand resting on the throwing arm. He's 73 years old, though he moves with surprising vigor. His beard reaches his chest, more grey than black now. His eyes are sharp as obsidian arrowheads. "You're early," he says, without looking at you. "Good. We have much to do before the others arrive." You approach, bowing respectfully. "The frame is ready?" you ask. Master Joe nods. "The reinforcements should hold, triple braced at the stress points, but theory and practice are different creatures. Today we learn which one bites." He gestures to a corner where stones sit in neat rows, each marked with characters indicating weight. "We'll start with the smallest, 20 jin. If the frame holds, we increase gradually." You nod, calculating. 20 jin is about the weight of a yearling pig. Not much, but it's a start. By mid-morning, 12 other team members have arrived. There's Liu, the metalworker, responsible for the iron pins and brackets holding the frame together. There's Feng and his 2 brothers, carpenters whose hands can joint wood so precisely you can barely see the seams. There's old Shen, the rope maker, who chews medicinal herbs constantly to dull the pain in his arthritic hands. And 6 labourers, strong men, pulled from the army to serve as the pulling crew. Master Joe calls them the engine's muscles. Everyone moves with purpose, but also visible nervousness. You all remember Chen's scream. You all know that timber under stress can explode like lightning strikes, that rope can snap and lash like whips, that failure here means more than professional embarrassment. The Duke of Chu executes engineers whose weapons fail during actual sieges. This is practice, yes, but failure here prevents you from ever reaching a real battlefield, which might be a blessing or a curse, depending on your perspective. Master Joe positions everyone carefully. The 6 labourers grip the pulling ropes, 3 men to each rope, 12 hands on 2 thick hemp lines. You and the other engineers stand at safe distances, with measuring cords and observation posts. Master Joe himself stands closest to the machine, seeming unconcerned about danger. "The principle is simple," he announces, his reedy voice carrying across the workshop. "Human strength, multiplied through leverage. The longer the arm, the greater the throw. But power means nothing without control." He gestures to the counterweight end of the beam. Traditional catapults use twisted cord for power, unpredictable, weakens with moisture. Our design uses human muscle, controllable, reliable. He pauses, his eyes sweeping across the team. "Today, we discover if theory matches reality. If the ancestors smile upon our work, we will revolutionize siege warfare. If they frown..." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. You all understand the stakes. The first stone weighs 20 jin. Feng's middle brother, whose name you've never learned, carries it to the sling as if it were a precious jade sculpture. He places it carefully in the center of the hemp weaving, then steps back quickly. The sling hangs from the throwing arm like a sleeping snake. Master Joe inspects the placement, adjusts the stone slightly, then nods. "Crew," he calls out. "Tension position." The 6 laborers brace their feet, gripping the ropes. Their muscles tense visibly, even though they haven't pulled yet. "Remember," Master Joe continues, "smooth and steady, no jerking. When I give the command, pull with even pressure. Stop when I say stop." He walks around the machine one more time, checking each joint, each bracket, each stress point. Your heart hammers against your ribs. This is it. "Prepare," Master Joe says. The workshop falls silent, except for someone's nervous breathing. You realize it's yours. Begin pull. The laborers lean back, slowly at first. The ropes go taut. You can hear them creak, hemp fibers stretching. The throwing arm begins to move, the heavy beam rotating around its axle with a deep groaning sound. The frame shudders. For a terrible moment, you think it will collapse again. But the triple-braced reinforcements hold. The beam continues its arc, pulling the sling and stone backward and downward, while the counterweight end rises. 20 degrees, 30, 45. "Hold," Master Joe commands. The laborers freeze, straining against the weight of the cocked beam. Their faces flush red with effort. Master Joe examines the frame again, looking for cracks, for any sign of structural failure. He takes his time. The laborer's arms tremble. Finally, he nods. "Release." The laborers let go simultaneously. The beam whips forward with shocking speed. The stone, cradled in its sling, follows the arc. Then at the precise moment the beam reaches vertical, the sling releases. The stone flies. It travels in a smooth parabola across the workshop, strikes the far wall with a tremendous crack, and falls to the ground. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moves. Then Master Joe begins to laugh. The euphoria lasts approximately 1 cup of tea's worth of time. Then, Master Joe returns to his characteristically serious demeanor and announces you'll test 50 progressively heavier stones before sunset. The laborers groan quietly. 50 repetitions means their arms will be useless by evening, but nobody argues. This is the work. You spend the rest of the day in a rhythm that becomes almost meditative. Load, pull, release, measure, record. Load, pull, release, measure, record. Each throw teaches something new. At 30 Jin, the beam's arc becomes noticeably more violent. At 40 Jin, one of the iron pins begins to work loose. Leo rushes in with tools to tighten it while the frame is still under tension, a terrifyingly dangerous task he performs with steady hands. By the time you reach 60 Jin stones, the laborers are drenched in sweat despite the autumn cold. Their hands are raw and bleeding through the cloth wraps they wear for grip. Master Joe shows no mercy. He increases the weight to 70 Jin, 80. At 90 Jin, the frame cracks audibly during the pull. Everyone freezes. Master Joe approaches slowly, running his fingers along the timber until he finds the source, a thin split in one of the uprights, barely visible. "Halt testing," he commands. "Frame inspection and repair." The laborers collapse gratefully to the ground, gasping. You bring them water from the barrel near the door. They nod thanks, but are too exhausted to speak. While Feng and his brothers assess the crack, you help Master Joe record measurements. The stones have been thrown at varying distances depending on weight and pull angle, but even the heaviest flew nearly 200 paces before striking the wall. Master Joe's expression is thoughtful. "The design works," he says quietly, "meant only for your ears, but it's not refined. The frame can't handle much more weight without fundamental changes. We need thicker timber, more bracing, different wood entirely perhaps. And the sling release mechanism is too unpredictable. Did you notice some stones tumbled while others flew straight?" You nod, you'd noticed. "Tomorrow," he continues. We'll experiment with sling lengths and release angles. But first, we rebuild this frame. Again. That night, you can barely lift your arms to eat your rice. The mess hall is crowded and loud with soldiers and craftsmen, but your table is quiet. The Workshop 7 team eats in exhausted silence. Even chewing feels like too much effort. Your mind keeps replaying the day's throws, analyzing the patterns. The sling's release point determines everything. Too early, and the stone flies high but short. Too late, and it drives into the ground 20 paces away. But the release is triggered by the stone's own momentum as the beam reaches its apex. How do you control something controlled by physics and weight distribution and a dozen other variables? Master Joe made it sound simple. Adjust sling length. But the sling that works for a 60 gin stone might be completely wrong for a 100 gin stone. After dinner, you return to your quarters expecting to collapse into sleep immediately. Instead, you find yourself lighting a candle and pulling out the scrolls Master Joe lent you 3 weeks ago. They're ancient texts on mechanics and leverage, originally written for building irrigation systems and grain elevators. You've read them 4 times already, but tonight something clicks that didn't before. The author discusses the relationship between arm length and lifting capacity, using equations you'd previously dismissed as theoretical. But apply those equations to the throwing arm. You grab your writing brush and begin calculating on a piece of bark paper. If the beam is 15 chi long and the sling attachment point is at the end, but you could adjust where the sling connects. Hours pass. Your candle burns down halfway. Someone in the adjacent quarters is snoring. You barely notice. The mathematics begins to reveal patterns. Shorter sling for heavier weights, longer sling for lighter weights. But more than that, the sling's attachment angle matters. If you attach it slightly off-center, the rotation introduces spin that might stabilize the stone's flight. You sketch rough diagrams, trying to visualize the forces. It's past midnight when you finally blow out the candle. Your eyes burn. Your back aches worse than before. But you're smiling in the darkness. Tomorrow, you'll show Master Joe your calculations. He might dismiss them as apprentice foolishness, or he might see what you see. Master Joe examines your calculations for what feels like an eternity. His face reveals nothing. You stand before him in the workshop, morning light streaming through the high windows, your bark paper covered with equations and sketches held in his weathered hands. The other team members work nearby, pretending not to listen, but clearly curious. Finally, Master Joe sets the papers down on his workbench. "Where did you learn to calculate force distribution?" he asks. His tone is neutral. You can't tell if he's impressed or annoyed. "The irrigation scrolls you lent me," you answer. "The principles seemed applicable." "If the sling attachment point..." "I know what you're proposing," Master Joe interrupts. He picks up the papers again, studying one particular diagram. Variable sling attachment. It's clever. It might even work. But he pauses, and for the first time since you've known him, he looks uncertain. "To test this properly, we need to modify the throwing arm, drill multiple attachment points, weakens the structural integrity. If it fails during a test, we lose days of work rebuilding. If it fails during the Duke's demonstration next month, we lose considerably more than time." He looks at you directly. "Are you confident enough in your calculations to risk that?" The question hangs in the air. You realize everyone has stopped working to hear your answer. This is a test. But not of mathematics. It's a test of conviction, of whether you're truly an engineer, or just someone who copies equations from old scrolls. Your mouth is dry. "The mathematics is sound," you say, trying to keep your voice steady. But mathematics on paper and timber under stress are different things. "I'm confident enough to suggest we try it on a scale model first, Build a small version. Test with proportionally lighter stones. If it works, then we modify the main frame. Master Joe's expression shifts. Is that approval? A careful answer, he says. Not brilliant, but careful is often better. Very well. Liu, Feng, you'll help our young theorist build his model. One day, if it works, we consider the larger modification. If it fails, we abandon this approach and proceed with my original design. One day. 24 hours to prove your theory, or look like a fool. You swallow hard and bow. Thank you, Master. As you turn to gather materials, you catch Liu grinning at you. Better start praying to the ancestors, theorist, he says, not unkindly. Building a scale model sounds simple until you actually start. Every proportion must be exact. If the small version is 1/10 the size of the full machine, then every measurement, every angle, every rope thickness must be precisely 1/10. Feng proves invaluable here, his carpenter's eye catching errors you'd have missed. The beam's cross-section ratio is wrong, he points out 3 hours into construction. You scaled down length but not width proportionally. It'll be too strong relative to its size. Won't teach you anything about the real frame's stress points. You check your calculations. He's right. You have to start over on the throwing arm. Liu works on tiny metal brackets, each one no larger than your thumbnail. He complains constantly, good-naturedly, but constantly. I'm a metal worker, not a jeweler, he mutters, squinting at his work. Next you'll have me making rice grain-sized washers. Despite the complaints, his work is impeccable. The miniature iron pins could pass for fine craft jewelry. By midday, you have the frame assembled. It stands waist-high, looking like a child's toy version of the massive machine looming nearby. The throwing arm is as long as your forearm. The slings are woven from fine thread instead of thick hemp rope. The whole thing looks absurdly delicate. Now for your brilliant innovation, Feng says, handing you a tiny drill. Show us these variable attachment points. Your hands are steadier than you expected as you mark 5 spots along the small throwing arm's end. Each spot represents a different sling attachment position. You drill carefully, aware that one slip will split the wood and force you to start over. No pressure, just your entire theory riding on 5 holes in a piece of oak smaller than a wine cup. The drill bites cleanly through. 1 hole, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. You thread thin cords through each hole. 5 miniature slings, each a slightly different length. We'll test each configuration with the same weight, you explain. The results should show which attachment point provides the most stable flight. Master Joe appears at your shoulder. You hadn't heard him approach. The Duke arrives in 4 hours for an unannounced inspection, he says calmly. I suggest you work faster. Building a scale model sounds simple until you actually start. Every proportion must be exact. If the small version is 1/10 the size of the full machine, then every measurement, every angle, every rope thickness must be precisely 1/10. Feng proves invaluable here, his carpenter's eye catching errors you'd have missed. The beam's cross-section ratio is wrong, he points out 3 hours into construction. You scaled down length but not width proportionally. It'll be too strong relative to its size. Won't teach you anything about the real frame's stress points. You check your calculations. He's right. You have to start over on the throwing arm. Liu works on tiny metal brackets, each one no larger than your thumbnail. He complains constantly, good-naturedly but constantly. I'm a metal worker, not a jeweler, he mutters, squinting at his work. Next you'll have me making rice grain-sized washers. Despite the complaints, his work is impeccable. The miniature iron pins could pass for fine craft jewelry. By midday you have the frame assembled. It stands waist-high, looking like a child's toy version of the massive machine looming nearby. The throwing arm is as long as your forearm. The slings are woven from fine thread instead of thick hemp rope. The whole thing looks absurdly delicate. "Now for your brilliant innovation," Feng says, handing you a tiny drill. "Show us these variable attachment points." Your hands are steadier than you expected as you mark 5 spots along the small throwing arm's end. Each spot represents a different sling attachment position. You drill carefully, aware that one slip will split the wood and force you to start over. No pressure, just your entire theory riding on 5 holes in a piece of oak smaller than a wine cup. The drill bites cleanly through. 1 hole, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. You thread thin cords through each hole. 5 miniature slings, each a slightly different length. We'll test each configuration with the same weight, you explain. The results should show which attachment point provides the most stable flight. Master Zhou appears at your shoulder. You hadn't heard him approach. "The Duke arrives in 4 hours for an unannounced inspection," he says calmly. "I suggest you work faster." The stone weighs exactly 103 jin. You know because you helped measure and mark it 3 days ago. It takes 4 men to carry it to the sling. The hemp cradle sags under the weight, fibers stretching visibly. Master Zhou supervises the loading with his usual meticulous care, but you notice his hands trembling slightly. He's as aware of the danger as anyone. The 6 labourers take position at the pulling ropes. Today they're not Workshop 7's regular crew. Master Zhou summoned soldiers from the garrison, stronger men for this heavy pull. They don't know about the crack. They don't know they're gambling their lives on timber and engineering. "Positions," Master Zhou calls out. Everyone moves to assigned spots except you. Master Zhou gestures for you to stand beside him, closer to the machine than safety dictates. "If this fails," he murmurs, "remember everything you've learned. You'll need to continue the work." Before you can respond, he raises his voice. "Prepare to pull." The soldiers brace. Their muscles bulge even before tension hits the ropes. "Begin pull. Steady pressure." The ropes go taut. The beam resists, then slowly begins to move. The weight is enormous. You can see the throwing arm trembling as it rises. The frame groans. 20 degrees. 30. At 45 degrees, the crack becomes visible, opening like a dark mouth in the upright timber. Master Zhou sees it. The Duke sees it too. His eyes narrow. But stopping now means admitting failure. The beam continues rising. 50 degrees, 60. The crack spreads. You hear wood fibers popping like distant fireworks. Someone in the Duke's entourage gasps. At 70 degrees, the crack runs halfway through the upright. The entire frame is shaking. The soldiers pulling the ropes are shouting with effort, faces purple, veins bulging in their necks. "Hold!" Master Zhou commands. The soldiers freeze, every muscle straining. The frame shudders but holds. Somehow, impossibly, it holds. The crack has stopped spreading. For 5 eternal heartbeats, nobody breathes. Then Master Zhou says quietly, clearly, "Release." The release is violence incarnate. The beam whips forward with a sound like thunder. The stone accelerates through its arc, and at the apex, the sling opens. The 100 jin stone flies. It travels in a perfect parabola across the workshop, crosses the entire 40-pace length, and strikes the far wall with enough force to shake the entire building. The impact is deafening. Stone dust explodes from the wall, timbers crack. For a moment, you think the wall itself will collapse, but it holds. Barely. The stone falls to the ground, having created a crater in the thick wooden planking, deep enough to fit your fist. Then the frame begins to fail. The crack, held in check during the tension, now spreads rapidly as the beam's momentum whipsaws through the structure. The upright splits completely through. The top section begins to tilt. "Clear!" Master Joe shouts, and everyone runs. The soldiers scramble away from the pulling ropes. You grab Master Joe's arm. He's standing frozen, watching his creation destroy itself, and pull him back. The upright collapses in slow motion, the massive timber crashing to the workshop floor with a boom that echoes off the walls. The throwing arm, now unsupported on one side, twists sideways and cracks at the axle mounting. The entire right side of the frame buckles. And then it stops. The machine sits broken but not completely destroyed, tilting at a drunken angle, sawdust and splinters scattered around it like a battlefield. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. Then the Duke of Chu begins to laugh. It's not cruel laughter. It's the genuine sound of someone delighted and amazed. "Master Joe," he calls out. "That was the most terrifying and impressive demonstration I've seen in 10 years. He walks closer, examining the crater in the wall, then turns back to the ruined machine. "How long to repair it?" Master Joe bows deeply. 3 weeks, my lord. Perhaps 4. We need to redesign the frame with your permission. Thicker timbers, different bracing patterns. The Duke waves his hand dismissively. "Take what you need from the military supplies. Any timber, any metal, whatever craftsman you require." He pauses, then adds, "I want 5 of these machines ready by spring." Can you do it? 5 machines. Spring. That's 6 months. Your mind immediately begins calculating labor requirements, material needs, training time for crews. Master Joe's expression reveals nothing, but you see his jaw tighten slightly. "Yes, my lord. 5 machines by spring." The Duke nods, satisfied, and departs with his entourage. The moment he's gone, Master Joe turns to you and the remaining team. His voice is quiet. "We're going to need more apprentices." The reality of producing 5 war machines hits you over the following days. One prototype was 3 months of work with 12 people. 5 complete machines means scaling up everything: labor, materials, space, time. Master Joe drafts plans for a new production facility. The Duke approves construction of a dedicated workshop compound outside the main military complex, with 5 separate bays large enough to house full-scale trebuchets. Within a week, construction crews arrive. Within 2 weeks, timber starts piling up in enormous stacks. Oak beams thick as your body, straight as arrow shafts, each one inspected personally by Master Joe. Your role changes rapidly. Master Joe promotes you from apprentice to assistant engineer, responsible for managing one of the 5 construction teams. It's terrifying. You're 19 years old, and suddenly you're directing carpenters twice your age, making decisions about timber stress and joint patterns. Some of them respect your technical knowledge. Others resent taking orders from someone young enough to be their son. You learn quickly that engineering skill alone isn't enough. You need to understand people, earn trust, admit when you don't know something. Your team's assigned machine is designated Unit 3. Feng leads the carpentry work. Liu handles all metal work. Old Shen makes the ropes. Though his hands are failing, his knowledge is irreplaceable. So you hire 2 young apprentices to work under his supervision, performing the actual braiding, while he inspects and instructs. You have 8 laborers for heavy work, and 2 other junior engineers who handle calculations and measurements. 15 people total, all looking to you for direction. The first week is chaos. Measurements don't match. Timber warps during drying. Metal brackets crack during fitting. You barely sleep, spending nights reviewing plans, calculating stress distributions, trying to anticipate problems before they arise. Master Joe visits weekly, inspecting progress, offering terse corrections. "The crossbeam angle is wrong," he'll say, pointing to something you spent 3 days calculating. "Redo it." No explanation, just redo it. So you do, and somehow it's always better.
3 months into production, disaster strikes Unit 1. You're working on Unit 3's throwing arm assembly when you hear the crash. Timber splintering, men shouting, then terrible silence. Everyone in your base stops working. You run toward Unit 1's workshop, arriving to find the frame collapsed during a test. The beam came down on 2 workers. One crawled out with a broken arm. The other didn't crawl out at all. His name was Wei, a carpenter from a village near the western border. He had a wife and 2 young daughters. You helped pull the timber off his body. You've never forgotten the weight of that oak beam, or how long it took to lift it, even with 6 men, or the unnatural angle of Wei's neck. The project stops the 3 days of mourning. Master Joe performs the proper rituals, burning incense and paper money for Wei's spirit. The Duke sends official condolences and a small compensation payment for Wei's family, enough to feed them for perhaps a year, if they're careful. It's not enough. It's never enough. When work resumes, everyone moves more carefully, double-checks everything, treats the machines with the wary respect usually reserved for dangerous animals. You find yourself thinking about Wei constantly. He was 43 years old. You're 19. Yet you gave him instructions, and he followed them. And now he's dead, building a weapon to kill people he'd never met, in cities he'd never seen. The moral complexity keeps you awake at nights. Master Joe finds you one evening, sitting outside your bay, staring at nothing. He sits beside you in silence for a while, then says, "Death is part of the work. Not a desirable part, but inevitable when humans push against the limits of what timber and rope can do." You don't answer. After another silence, he continues, "Wei's death was not your fault. The failure was in Unit 1's design. Supervisor Han ignored specifications on the crossbeam thickness. Pride. He thought he knew better than the calculations. Wei paid for Han's arrogance. Does that make it better? You ask. Master Joe considers this. No, he finally says, but it makes it understandable. We don't build these machines because we love death. We build them because our state's survival demands walls be broken and enemies be defeated. The moral burden isn't yours alone. It's shared by everyone, from me to the Duke, to the soldiers who'll use these weapons. We're all complicit. He stands, old joints creaking, but that doesn't excuse carelessness. Learn from this. Check everything twice. Trust mathematics over intuition, and never let pride override safety. He walks away, leaving you with thoughts heavier than oak beams. Winter arrives early. The workshop compounds aren't heated. No military facility wastes fuel on worker comfort. So you work in fingerless gloves, with frost forming on the timbers. Hemp rope becomes stiff and brittle in the cold, requiring special oils to maintain flexibility. The metal brackets frost over, making loose fitting work dangerous, as metal can shatter when struck at freezing temperatures. Everything takes longer. Your breath mists constantly. Fingers go numb after an hour of work. Yet, the Duke's deadline approaches relentlessly. Spring means campaign season. Spring means these machines must be operational, tested, and ready for siege warfare. Unit 3 reaches final assembly in the coldest week of winter. The frame stands complete, all major components installed. The throwing arm hangs ready, the axle pins secured with Liu's careful metalwork. The ropes are precisely braided to Shen's exacting standards. Your assistant rope makers have learned well under his instruction. Everything measures true according to your calculations. It should work. Probably will work. But you remember Wei. You remember the sound of splintering timber. So you check everything again. And then, a third time. Feng watches you measuring the same crossbeam for the 4th time.
It's accurate, he says gently. You've checked it. I've checked it. Even Master Joe inspected it last week. I know, you say, but measure it again anyway. The first test is scheduled for dawn, when the air is coldest and the timber most brittle. If it holds in these conditions, it'll hold when warm. Master Joe insists all 5 units conduct first tests on the same day, a calculated show of confidence for the Duke's visiting inspectors. You barely sleep the night before, mind running through every possible failure point. What if the cold has created invisible stress fractures? What if the oil treatment on the ropes was insufficient? What if your calculations for winter conditions were wrong? You arrive at the workshop before dawn, frost crunching under your feet. Inside, the Unit 3 team is already preparing. They're as nervous as you are. Feng offers you a cup of hot tea from his personal supply. Drink, he insists. If the machine kills us, better to die warm. His dark humor cuts the tension slightly. Others laugh, though the sound is brittle as ice. Dawn breaks grey and cold. Master Joe arrives with the Duke's chief military inspector, General Wu, a scarred veteran who views engineers with barely concealed contempt. More scholar toys. You hear him mutter to Master Joe. Battles are won with swords and courage, not complicated carpentry. Master Joe doesn't respond. He knows that results speak louder than arguments. All 5 units are ready. Each workshop has a crew of 6 soldiers at the pulling ropes, a loading team, and the engineering supervisors. The plan is simple. Each unit will throw a 90 gin stone 200 paces into the test field. Whichever unit achieves the straightest flight and most accurate landing wins additional funding for refinements. It's competition and proof of concept combined. Unit 5 goes first. Their throw is acceptable. The stone flies true for most of its arc, though it tumbles slightly at the end, indicating their sling release isn't quite perfected. Still, it lands within 10 paces of the target marker. General Wu grunts, possibly impressed despite himself. Unit 2 throws next. Their stone flies beautifully, a smooth parabola that ends precisely on target. Your heart sinks slightly. That's going to be difficult to beat. Units 4 and 1 follow with respectable throws, though Unit 1's stone flies left of target by about 20 paces. Their frame geometry is still slightly off after the rebuild, following Wei's accident. Then it's Unit 3's turn. Your turn. You've prepared for this moment for 3 months, but standing here watching Feng's brothers load the stone, you feel remarkably calm. Not confident, calm. There's a difference. Confidence is believing you'll succeed. Calm is accepting that you've done everything possible, and the result is now in the hands of physics, timber, and rope. Prepare, you call to your crew. They take positions, movements practiced to precision. These 6 soldiers have been pulling ropes together for weeks now. They know each other's rhythms. Begin pull. The ropes go taut. The beam rises, oak groaning but holding. The cold hasn't weakened it. At maximum tension, you scan the frame quickly. No visible cracks. No stress failures. No stress failures. Release. The beam whips forward. The stone flies. You track its arc, already knowing from the launch angle that it's good. The projectile describes a perfect parabola, rotating slowly for stability, and strikes the ground exactly on the target marker. Not near it, on it. Dust explodes at the impact point. For 3 seconds, silence. Then Master Joe says calmly, "Well done." General Wu walks to the impact site, examining the crater. You follow at a respectful distance with Master Joe. The stone has driven into the frozen earth with impressive force. "How many men to operate?" Wu asks, still looking at the crater. 6 to pull, 3 to load and adjust, 1 supervisor.
you answer. 10 men total per machine, General. Wu nods slowly. And training time? 2 weeks for competent operation, 4 weeks for optimal accuracy. Wu finally looks at you directly. You're young for an assistant engineer. It's not quite a question, not quite an accusation. I'm old enough to do the mathematics, General, you reply. Something almost like a smile crosses his weathered face. Mathematics. Yes, that's what Master Zhou keeps saying. Mathematics. And leverage. He turns back to the crater. I've spent 30 years learning to break walls with rams and siege towers. Lost good men in every siege. If your mathematical toys can save even a dozen soldiers' lives, they're worth their weight in bronze. The formal inspection concludes an hour later. All 5 units are declared operational. Master Zhou receives official commendation from the Duke, with bonus payments distributed to all engineering teams. You receive 30 strings of coins, more money than you've ever seen at once. That night, the workshop teams celebrate at a local tavern. The rice wine flows freely. Feng gets drunk and starts singing bawdy songs. Even Liu loosens up, telling elaborate stories about his failed romance with a merchant's daughter years ago. You sit with them, drinking, laughing, feeling for the first time since Wei's death that perhaps this work has value beyond destruction. These machines might save lives. Attacking soldiers, yes, but lives nonetheless. It's a strange sort of moral comfort, but you take it. Old Shen, who rarely drinks, appears beside you with a fresh cup of warm wine. Your variable sling design, he says quietly. We used it. That's why our throw was so accurate. You'd forgotten. After building the small-scale model months ago, you'd incorporated the adjustable attachment points into Unit 3's final design. It had become so natural, you stopped thinking about it as your innovation. It worked, Shen continues, because you tested it properly, measured, calculated, didn't just assume. He drinks, then adds, Wei would have appreciated that approach. He was a careful carpenter, might still be alive if others had been equally careful. You don't know how to respond, so you just nod. Shen pats your shoulder and wanders away into the crowd. You sit quietly, watching your team celebrate, thinking about innovation and responsibility, success and death, mathematics and human life. The wine tastes bitter. Spring arrives with orders for deployment. All 5 machines are to be disassembled, transported to the border, and reassembled at the siege of Yue City. The state of Yue has been a thorn in Chu's side for decades. Fortified, well supplied, and strategically positioned on a crucial trade route. Previous siege attempts have failed bloodily. The Duke believes the traction trebuchets will change that equation. You receive orders to accompany Unit 3 as its operational supervisor. This means leaving the relative safety of the workshop compound for actual warfare. You've never been in combat. You've never even seen a real battle. The closest you've come to violence was watching soldiers train in the practice yards. The journey takes 12 days. Each machine travels disassembled in 3 massive ox-drawn carts. Frame components in one cart, throwing arm and axle in another, ropes and hardware in the third. Your crew of 10 travels on foot, walking beside the carts to ensure nothing shifts or damages during transport. The roads are terrible, mud from spring rains turning paths into sucking quagmires. Twice, carts become stuck so deeply, it takes 20 men and 4 oxen to extract them. Everything is coated in mud. You sleep in wet clothes, eat rice that's half grit, develop blisters on your feet that burst and reform daily. On the 8th day, you see your first dead body outside of workshop accidents. Raiders hit a supply convoy ahead of your column. By the time you arrive, it's over. Guards have driven off the attackers, but 3 cart drivers lie dead on the road, throats cut for the few valuables they carried. Nobody stops. The convoy keeps moving. You keep walking past the bodies, trying not to look at their faces, at the flies already gathering. Welcome to warfare, you think. This is what your machines enable. You're marching toward a city you'll help destroy. full of people whose names you'll never know, whose crime was being born in the wrong state. The moral simplicity you felt after the successful tests evaporates. By nightfall, you're vomiting beside the road. Feng thinks it's something you ate. You don't correct him.
Yue City first becomes visible on the 10th day, rising from the plain like a grey mountain. The walls are enormous, 30 chi high, built from stone blocks cut so precisely you could barely slip a knife blade between them. Guard towers punctuate the walls every 50 paces. Even from a distance of several li, you can see soldiers moving on the ramparts, tiny figures against the massive fortifications. The city has stood for 300 years. Dozens of sieges have broken against those walls, like waves against a cliff. Your wooden machines suddenly seem absurdly inadequate. The Chu military camp sprawls across the plain outside effective arrow range. 10,000 soldiers, maybe more. Supply tents, command pavilions, horse corrals, siege equipment storage. It's a temporary city itself, complete with designated streets and districts. Your convoy is directed to the engineering section, a muddy field where other siege equipment sits in various states of assembly. Rams, scaling ladders, mobile towers. You begin unloading Unit 3, but immediately encounter problems. The ground is too soft for the machine's weight distribution. The frame will sink during operation, potentially destabilizing the entire structure. You need to build a wooden platform first, which requires lumber that's currently allocated to other projects. 3 days are lost in bureaucratic negotiations with the quartermaster, a petty official who seems to delight in making engineers miserable. Timber is precious, he says for the 15th time. I can't simply give you 20 logs because your machine needs special treatment. You explain about weight distribution and ground pressure. He doesn't care. Finally, Master Zhou intervenes, pulling rank and connections. The timber arrives, but your team now works 3 days behind schedule. The Duke wants attacks to begin within the week. Meanwhile, Unit 2 has already assembled and conducted range tests. Unit 1 is assembled, but their frame developed cracks during transport. They're doing emergency repairs. Units 4 and 5 are experiencing similar problems to yours, though less severe. You work through the night, assembling the platform by torchlight. The sounds of the siege camp surround you. Soldiers gambling and arguing, horses whinnying, commanders shouting orders. Somewhere nearby, a soldier plays a flute, the melody sad and haunting. You pause in your work to listen. Feng appears beside you. That's a US song, he says quietly. We have US soldiers in our own camp, prisoners who chose service over execution. They're being forced to help attack their own people. You have no response to that. You return to fitting timbers, the flute's melody following you into the darkness. Unit 3 stands fully assembled on the 5th day. The machine looks different here, outside the workshop. In the controlled environment of the compound, it was an engineering achievement. Here, against the backdrop of US City's walls with an army surrounding it, it's clearly a weapon designed to kill people. The transformation in your mind is sudden and disorienting. This is no longer an abstract puzzle of mathematics and materials. This is a tool for breaking stone and flesh, operated by you, at the command of men whose interest is conquest and political power. General Wu conducts the operational briefing for all engineering teams. The 5 trebuchets will be positioned in an arc facing Yue's western gate, the weakest point in the city's defenses, though weakest is relative when discussing walls this massive. The attack plan is methodical. Each machine will target the same section of wall, concentrating force on approximately a 30 chi stretch.
Theory suggests that sustained bombardment of a single point will create structural weaknesses, causing cracks that will eventually propagate through the entire section. Eventually might mean days. It might mean weeks. The city has supplies for at least 3 months. This will be a long siege. Your position is designated as Station 3 in the bombardment line. Unit 2 sits to your right, Unit 5 to your left. The stations are spaced 50 paces apart, close enough to provide mutual support if defenders make a sortie, far enough that a lucky fire arrow striking one machine won't immediately threaten others. You spend 2 days conducting range tests, adjusting the throwing angle to account for the 200 pace distance to the walls. The mathematics are straightforward, but environmental factors complicate everything. Wind shifts constantly. Temperature affects rope flexibility. The wooden platform settles slightly with each throw, changing the angle microscopically but measurably. You make constant small adjustments, recording every change in your logbook. This is what engineering means. Not dramatic breakthroughs, but endless tiny refinements in pursuit of consistent accuracy. On the 7th night, Master Joe visits your station. You're quiet, he observes. Not like during the tests, you continue oiling a rope section, not meeting his eyes. The tests were about whether the machines worked. This is about destroying homes and killing people I've never met. Master Joe is silent for a long moment. Finally, yes, that's exactly what this is. His bluntness is somehow comforting. At least he's not pretending otherwise. The bombardment begins at dawn on the 8th day. General Wu gives the order from his command position. Signal flags wave. You call to your crew. Load stone. 80 jin. Standard throw. Theng's brothers haul the stone to the sling. You've switched to slightly lighter projectiles for sustained bombardment rather than maximum impact. Lighter stones mean faster throwing rates, and rate of fire matters in siege warfare. The theory is to overwhelm the wall with continuous stress, rather than occasional massive blows. Your 6 pullers grip the ropes. You've drilled this sequence hundreds of times. Prepare. Begin pull. The beam rises. Release. The stone flies. You watch its arc across the morning sky. For those few seconds of flight, the stone is almost beautiful. A perfect geometric parabola, exactly as mathematics predicts. Then it strikes the wall. The impact sounds like a drumbeat, stone on stone, echoing across the plain. Dust explodes from the impact point. When it clears, you can see the damage. A white scar on dark stone, perhaps an inch deep, barely noticeable. One stone, one tiny crater. To either side, Units 2 and 5 are firing on the same schedule you are. Their stones strike seconds after yours, adding their own small craters to the growing pattern of impacts. Load next stone, you command, and again, and again, and again. By midday, you've thrown 83 stones. Your crew's movements have become completely automatic. Load, pull, release, reset. Load, pull, release, reset. The rhythm is hypnotic. You barely need to give commands anymore. The pullers know when to begin. The loaders know the weight and placement. You simply observe, making tiny adjustments to angle as the platform settles and conditions change. The wall section you're targeting has taken perhaps 200 impacts from all 3 machines combined. The damage is now visible even from this distance. A rough patch of stone, lighter colored from the repeated strikes, with small cracks beginning to radiate outward. Not structural damage yet, not even close, but it's a start. General Wu visits at noon, observing the bombardment. How many stones per day? He asks. You calculate quickly. At current rate,
Each machine can throw approximately 200 stones in a 12-hour day. 600 stones per day from 3 machines at this section. Wu grunts. How many days to breach? Unknown, General. Depends on wall construction, stone quality, how deep the structural issues run. Could be 10 days, could be 30.
5 days into the bombardment, defenders respond. You hear shouting from the walls, see sudden activity. Then their own catapults appear on the ramparts. Smaller machines, but they have the advantage of elevation. Stones begin falling toward the siege lines. The first one lands 50 paces in front of Unit 3, throwing up a geyser of mud. The second lands 30 paces away. They're finding their range. "Shields!" you shout. Your crew grabs the large wicker shields you've prepared for exactly this situation. The shields won't stop a direct hit. Nothing portable can stop an 80-jin stone traveling at speed, but they provide some protection from splinters and fragments. A stone lands 10 paces to your left, close enough that you feel the impact through the ground. Too close. But stopping now means ceding initiative to the defenders. Master Zhou's standing orders are clear. Maintain fire rate regardless of counterattack. The bombardment must be relentless. So you continue. Load stone! Quick as possible. Your crew moves fast, loading and firing, then ducking behind shields during the vulnerable loading phase. The defenders' fire is sporadic. They have fewer machines and less ammunition. But each stone that falls is terrifying. You watch one strike 30 paces to your right, narrowly missing Unit 2's crew. The stone bounces after impact, tumbling through the siege lines and crushing a soldier who was too slow to dodge. You hear the scream. Try not to think about it. Load stone, you call again. This becomes the pattern. Fire and take cover. Fire and take cover. Your crew's efficiency drops by nearly half as they spend more time hiding than operating. But you maintain fire. After 2 hours, the defenders' counterattack slackens. Perhaps they're running low on ammunition, or perhaps their machines are having mechanical difficulties. You use the respite to accelerate your own fire rate, making up for lost time. By evening, you're actually ahead of your quota. 347 stones thrown today from your machine alone. The wall section looks worse. Deep spalling visible. Cracks definitely propagating, though still no structural failure. General Wu seems satisfied. Keep the pressure, he tells you. The wall will break. It's just a question of when. That night, you dream of falling stones. You wake twice, gasping, sure you're about to be crushed. Both times you're safe in your tent, with only the normal sounds of a sleeping camp around you. On the 12th day, the wall section develops a significant crack. It appears suddenly during your morning bombardment. One moment, the damage is superficial spalling and surface fractures. The next moment, there's a dark line running vertically through the impact zone. The crack is perhaps half an inch wide and extends upward 15 chi, visible even from 200 paces away. You immediately send a runner to General Wu. Within an hour, Master Zhou arrives to assess the damage. He studies the crack through a distance scope, an ingenious device of polished bronze mirrors that makes distant objects appear closer. After a long observation, he nods. Structural failure has begun. The crack extends through the outer-facing stones into the rubble core. Continue bombardment on this exact spot. The section will collapse within days. You intensify fire rate. All 3 machines targeting this section increase to maximum sustainable pace. Your crew throws 400 stones that day, working past sunset by torchlight. The wall crack grows visibly, widening and lengthening. Secondary cracks appear, spreading like tree branches from the main fracture. Behind the walls, you can see defenders scrambling. They're aware the section is failing and are trying to reinforce it from inside. Teams of workers haul timber and stone to shore up the weakening wall. But they're fighting physics now, and physics is patient and merciless. The accumulated stress from 5,000 stone impacts has exceeded the wall's structural tolerance. Reinforcement can slow, but not stop the inevitable collapse. Day 13. The crack is now 2 inches wide at its widest point. You can see completely through it in places, glimpsing the interior reinforcement work. Your stones no longer just crater the surface. They punch through the outer stones and strike the rubble core, loosening the binding and destroying the wall's integrity from within. Defenders have stopped their own catapult fire, redirecting all personnel to reinforcement efforts. It doesn't matter. Day 14. The crack is 4 inches wide. Stones are falling from the wall face. The entire section looks ready to collapse at any moment. General Wu orders assault troops to ready ladders and bridges, preparing to exploit the breach the instant it occurs. You barely sleep now, maintaining nearly continuous bombardment, with crews rotating in shifts. Day 15. Dawn. You're at your station preparing for another day of bombardment when you hear it, a deep groaning sound like the earth itself protesting. The wall section is moving. The crack widens visibly as you watch, stone grinding against stone. Then, with a roar that drowns out all other sound, 30 chi of wall, thousands of tons of stone, collapses inward. Dust explodes upward in an enormous cloud, obscuring everything. The ground shakes even at this distance. For perhaps 20 seconds, visibility is zero. Just dust and the continuing rumble of falling stone. Then the cloud begins to clear. Where the wall stood, there's now a rough slope of rubble, a ramp of broken stone rising from ground level to the city's interior. A breach. A genuine breach through fortifications that have stood for 3 centuries. The siege camp erupts in shouting. Signal horns blast. The assault troops sprint forward, thousands of soldiers rushing toward the breach. You watch them go. These men who will climb over rubble you created, will fight through streets your machines opened, will kill or be killed in consequences flowing directly from your engineering work. Feng stands beside you, watching the attack unfold. "We did it," he says, awed. You nod numbly. Yes, you did it. You broke the wall. You changed warfare. And now people will die because of your success. The assault continues all day. You can hear the fighting, screams, clash of weapons, buildings burning. Your crew stands idle, machines no longer needed. The immediate job is done. By evening, Chu forces control the breach and are pushing into the city's outer districts. Resistance is fierce. Yue soldiers and armed citizens fight building by building. The streets become killing grounds. Smoke rises from dozens of fires. You sit outside your tent, listening to a city dying, knowing you're responsible. Not solely responsible. Thousands of people made this siege happen. But your machines were the critical factor. General Wu said as much when he visited earlier. Without these trebuchets, we'd still be staring at intact walls. You changed everything. He meant it as a compliment. You accepted it as such, bowing appropriately. But now, alone, you wonder if breaking the unbreakable was actually worth doing.
UA City falls completely after 3 days of street fighting. The survivors surrender. The Duke of Chu orders the standard treatment for rebellious cities. Male survivors of military age are executed. Women and children are enslaved. The city is looted and then partially razed as a warning. You watch refugees being marched out in long columns. People who were living ordinary lives 2 weeks ago, now broken and defeated, because their government chose the wrong side in a political dispute they probably barely understood. An elderly woman stumbles near your position. A guard shoves her back into line with a spear butt. She doesn't even react, just keeps walking with empty eyes. You think about your own parents, in a small village 3 provinces away. If Chu loses a war, this could be them. The Duke holds a victory celebration that evening. All officers and key personnel are required to attend, including engineering staff. Master Zhou brings his entire team. There's roasted meat, fine wine, musicians playing triumph songs. The Duke personally commends Master Zhou, praising the revolutionary siege weapons. Master Zhou in turn credits his team, naming each engineer, including you. The Duke looks at you with interest. So young to have such impact, he says. What would you build next if given unlimited resources? It's clearly a test question. You remember Master Zhou's advice. Powerful men want to hear confidence, not uncertainty. Improvements to the current design, you answer carefully. Greater range, faster reload, better accuracy. But also entirely new weapons. Perhaps machines that use counterweights instead of human power. Achieving throws of 300 paces or more. The Duke smiles. Ambitious. I like that. Continue your work. The state needs engineers who think beyond today's battles to tomorrow's campaigns. He moves on to other conversations. Master Zhou catches your eye and nods minutely. Good answer. But the celebration feels hollow. Yes, you won. Yes, you're praised. Yes, you have a secure future. But tonight, thousands of people sleep in chains, or not at all, because your mathematics were accurate. Success in warfare is measured in ruins and graves. The wine tastes like ash. You return to the capital with the army 3 weeks later. The journey back is faster, no heavy equipment to transport. No need to worry about preserving siege machines. The 5 trebuchets remain at US City, now a Chu military garrison. General Wu wants them positioned permanently for regional control, ready to threaten any other cities considering resistance. Your work is done there, but Master Zhou has plans for you. Back in the workshop compound, he assigns you to lead the next research project. The counterweight trebuchet you mentioned to the Duke. Turn your concept into reality, he tells you. You have 2 years, and whatever resources you need. 2 years to create something that might make the human-powered machines obsolete. It's exciting from a pure engineering standpoint. Counterweights offer potential for much greater power and consistency. But it's also troubling. Each innovation in siege warfare makes killing more efficient. Is that really how you want to spend your life? You throw yourself into research anyway, because what else can you do? You're an engineer. Engineering is what you know. You read ancient texts, conduct experiments with scale models, fill scrolls with calculations. The basic concept is straightforward. Replace human pulling power with a massive counterweight that falls and converts gravitational energy
into throwing force. But the details are complex. Beam ratios, counterweight size, sling release mechanisms, frame stress analysis. Every variable affects every other variable. Months pass in focused work. You hire your own team of craftsmen. Your scale models grow increasingly sophisticated. By autumn, you have a working prototype 1/3 full size. It throws stones further than the traction machines, with much more consistency. Master Joe observes your tests with obvious approval. "This will revolutionize siege warfare," he says. You know he's right. You also know that revolutionize siege warfare means enable more efficient killing. But you're too deep into the technical challenges to stop now. This is the trap of innovation. Once you see how something could work better, the intellectual puzzle becomes irresistible, regardless of the consequences. You're building better weapons because you can, because the mathematics is elegant, because engineering problems demand engineering solutions.
Winter brings news of another war. The state of Qin, Chu's northern rival, has fielded their own siege machines, crude copies of your traction design, built from captured examples or spies' reports. They're using them against Chu border fortresses. The Duke is furious that the technology has proliferated so quickly. Master Joe is philosophical. Innovation cannot be monopolized, he tells you. Knowledge spreads. Any advantage is temporary. Our only option is to innovate faster than rivals can copy, so the race accelerates. Your counterweight trebuchet development gets additional funding and a larger team. Master Joe wants a full-scale functional prototype by spring, ready to deploy against Qin if necessary. You work through the winter, barely sleeping. The full-scale machine is enormous. The counterweight alone weighs 8,000 jin, requiring a stone and timber box large enough to house a family. The throwing arm is 20 chi long, thick as your torso, made from the straightest oak in Chu's forests. The frame must support forces that would snap normal timber like twigs. Every joint must be perfect. Every calculation must be precise. One error, and the machine will tear itself apart during the first throw, potentially killing everyone nearby. The pressure is immense. You dream about collapses, about frames splitting, about stones falling short and crushing your own troops. The nightmares from Yue City have returned, though now they're mixed with engineering failures and professional disgrace. The full-scale prototype stands ready in early spring. It's magnificent in a terrible way. A monument to human ingenuity applied to destruction. The counterweight box towers overhead. The throwing arm sweeps through an arc that could swat a man like an insect. Everything is scaled up. The power, the range, the danger. Master Joe conducts the inspection personally, checking every detail with his usual meticulous care. He finds 17 potential problems. You spend another 2 weeks making corrections. Finally, he approves the test. The entire engineering division assembles to watch. Even the Duke arrives, traveling from the palace to witness this new weapon. No pressure, just your entire career riding on whether mathematics and timber can handle forces they've never experienced before. You stand beside the machine, hand on the frame, feeling the grain of the wood. This is your creation. For better or worse, this is your legacy. The counterweight falls. 8,000 jin of stone drops 4 chi in a fraction of a second. The throwing arm whips forward with speed that blurs vision. The stone, 150 jin, heavier than any projectile the traction machines can throw, accelerates through its arc. The sling releases. The projectile flies. You track it, already knowing from the launch angle that the throw is good. The stone travels in a perfect parabola, soaring over the test field, and strikes the ground 320 paces from the machine. 320 paces, 60% greater range than the traction design.
and the accuracy is remarkable. The stone lands within 5 paces of the target marker. The silence lasts 3 heartbeats. Then the assembled crowd erupts in amazement. The Duke is laughing with delight. Master Joe allows himself a rare smile. Your team is hugging each other, shouting with triumph. You stand quietly, watching the dust settle at the impact site. Feeling nothing, you should feel pride. You should feel accomplishment. You've created something revolutionary, proved your theories, advanced the art of siege engineering by a decade in a single throw. But all you feel is tired. Tired and old, and aware that you've just made warfare significantly more terrible. 320 paces means no city wall is safe. Means defenders can't even reach these machines with counterfire. Means sieges will become even more one-sided slaughters. The Duke approaches, places a hand on your shoulder. "Remarkable work," he says. "How soon can you produce 10 of these?" 10. Of course he wants 10. Why would he want just one revolution in warfare when he can have many? 2 years, you hear yourself answer. Perhaps less with adequate resources. The Duke nods. "You'll have whatever you need. Master Joe, assign him full production authority. This weapon will secure Chu's dominance for a generation." He walks away, already planning campaigns, already visualizing broken walls and conquered cities. Master Joe stays behind. He looks at you carefully. "You're not celebrating," he observes. "Should I be?" you ask. Master Joe considers this. Most engineers would. You've created something that will change history. That's what worries me. Master Joe has no response to that. He pats your shoulder, an uncharacteristic gesture of comfort, and follows the Duke, leaving you beside your successful, terrible creation. Production of 10 counterweight trebuchets becomes your life for the next 18 months. You're given expanded workshops, unlimited timber and metal, and 40 craftsmen. The work is technically satisfying. You refine the design with each unit, improving efficiency, reducing construction time, developing better training methods for crews. By Unit 5, you've streamlined production enough that construction takes only 2 months per machine. Quality improves with each iteration, but so does your sense of disconnect from the work. These are just engineering problems. Optimize this angle, strengthen that joint, calculate these stress loads. You can focus entirely on technical details and ignore what the machines actually do, except you can't ignore it completely. News arrives regularly of sieges where your weapons are deployed. City after city falls more quickly than would have been possible before. The traction trebuchets are terrible enough. The counterweight machines are devastating. Chu's military dominance grows. Rival states scramble to develop their own siege weapons. The arms race you help trigger accelerates. Master Joe tells you that captured documents from Qin show they're working on even larger counterweight designs, trying to exceed your 300-pace range. You immediately begin calculations for longer throwing arms, heavier counterweights. Not because you want to, but because if you don't, someone else will, and then Chu's advantage disappears. This is the logic of war. You can't unilaterally stop innovating, because unilateral disarmament means defeat. You're 21 years old now. You have wealth, status, professional recognition. You command teams of craftsmen and receive commendations from the highest military authorities. You're considered one of the warring state's most important engineers, and you're miserable. You drink more than you should. You sleep badly. When you do sleep, you dream of walls collapsing, of refugees marching, of that elderly woman's empty eyes at Yue City. Feng notices. You need rest, he tells you one evening. When was the last time you took a day off? You can't remember. Work provides the only escape from thinking about the consequences of work.
So you work constantly, trapped in the cycle, unable to see a way out that doesn't mean abandoning everything you've built, everyone who depends on you, every craftsman whose livelihood comes from building what you design.
The breaking point comes unexpectedly. You're supervising final assembly of Unit 9 when a messenger arrives from the front. A routine report, another city fallen, another successful deployment of counterweight trebuchets. The messenger mentions casualties almost as an afterthought. Nearly 4,000 enemy dead in the siege, maybe 200 Chu losses, clean victory, 4,000 people. You ask which city, the messenger names it. A small trading town you've never heard of, probably never would have heard of except that you helped destroy it. The messenger notices your expression. Something wrong, engineer? You shake your head. Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly as designed. But something breaks inside. That evening, you don't go to the tavern with your crew. You don't review tomorrow's work schedule. You walk out of the compound and keep walking. Through the military district, through the craftsman's quarter, past the markets closing for the night. You walk until you reach the outer wall of the capital itself. Not a military fortification, just the old boundary wall from when the city was smaller. You lean against it, this stone barrier that's protected people for centuries, and think about how quickly your machines could reduce it to rubble. How nothing is permanent. How every wall eventually falls. How your life's work is about making that falling happen faster and more efficiently. A voice behind you. Contemplating jumping? You turn. It's Master Joe. He approaches slowly, moves beside you at the wall. I've been watching you deteriorate for months, he continues. Wanted to see if you'd find your own balance. But tonight, your crew said you just walked away mid-shift. That's not like you. You don't answer immediately, finally. How do you live with it? Knowing what we build, what it does. Master Joe is quiet for a long moment. Not easily, he admits. I tell myself that warfare exists regardless of my participation. That if I don't build these machines, someone less competent will, and more soldiers will die in failed sieges. That our weapons end conflicts faster, reducing total suffering. I tell myself many things. Do you believe them? You ask. Another long pause. Some days. Master Joe stares out at the city lights. You're asking the wrong question, though. It's not whether I believe my justifications. It's whether I can continue functioning despite my doubts. And the answer is yes, because I must. I have responsibilities. To my craftsmen, to my state, to the knowledge I possess. Walking away doesn't undo what I've built. It just wastes what I've learned. You return to work the next day. What else can you do? Master Zhao was right. Walking away doesn't undo anything, doesn't save anyone, just wastes knowledge and abandons responsibilities. So you continue. But something has shifted. You make a decision. You'll document everything, every calculation, every design refinement, every lesson learned, not as military secrets, but as engineering knowledge. You begin writing a comprehensive treatise on siege machinery, theory, practice, mathematics, materials, not to glorify the weapons, but to record the knowledge objectively. Perhaps someday, when the Warring States period ends, if it ends, this knowledge can be preserved for purposes beyond war. Perhaps these principles of leverage and force can build instead of destroy. Master Zhao discovers your writing project. You expect him to forbid it. Military technology is closely guarded. Instead, he reads your draft chapters and nods slowly. I've been thinking about a similar project, he admits. The knowledge shouldn't die with us. Engineering principles are neither good nor evil. They're simply principles. Tools can build or break. The moral burden lies with those who choose how tools are used. He offers to co-author the treatise, contributing his decades of experience. The project becomes your shared endeavor, worked on late nights after daily duties end. The writing is therapeutic in unexpected ways. Explaining principles in clear language forces you to understand them more deeply. Recording failures, along with successes, provides context for future engineers. Here's what doesn't work and why. You include sections on safety, on material limitations, on the importance of mathematics over intuition. You write about Wei's death, not naming him, but recording the lesson. Pride and shortcuts kill. The treatise grows to hundreds of scrolls. It becomes something larger than either you or Master Zhao originally envisioned. Not just a technical manual, but a philosophy of engineering. How to build carefully, how to test thoroughly, how to balance innovation with responsibility. Whether the Duke or anyone else will allow such a document to exist openly, you don't know. But you write it anyway, because some things need to be recorded, regardless of whether they're immediately publishable.
3 years after your first successful throw, the military situation shifts dramatically. The state of Zhao develops a counter-strategy to trebuchet sieges. They build walls with sloped earthen ramparts behind the stone facing. Stones striking the walls dissipate their energy into the earth rather than cracking masonry. The trebuchets become significantly less effective. Chu's military advantage narrows. The Duke demands solutions. You research countermeasures, different projectile types, firebombs, incendiary materials. You develop new munitions that spread flames across wooden buildings behind walls. It's effective. It's also more horrifying than simple stone impacts. You're creating weapons that burn people in their homes. One evening, reviewing test results for incendiary projectiles, you have a sudden realization. You don't have to do this. Not actually. Master Zhou is 67 now, considering retirement. You could request reassignment to civilian engineering, irrigation, bridges, grain elevators. The state needs those too. Your skills would transfer. You'd earn less money, have less prestige, but you'd build things that help rather than harm. It's possible. For the first time in years, you see an exit path. The question is whether you have the courage to take it. Walking away from military engineering means abandoning a career you've spent 6 years building. It means disappointing the Duke, confusing your craftsmen, possibly even angering military authorities who might see it as abandonment during crisis. But it also means stopping, simply stopping your contribution to increasingly efficient violence. You discuss it with Master Zhou. He listens carefully, then says, "I won't try to persuade you either way. This choice is yours alone. But I'll tell you what I told myself 30 years ago when I faced similar questions. If you leave, someone else fills the role. Someone possibly less careful, less ethical, less concerned with minimizing suffering. Your replacement might not agonize over casualties, or document safety lessons, or think twice about weapons that burn civilians. Is your departure actually moral if it results in worse outcomes? It's a compelling argument. It's also possibly just rationalization. You genuinely can't tell which. What you do know is that you're exhausted. Exhausted by the work, the moral weight, the constant innovation toward destruction cycle. You're 22 years old, and you feel ancient. Maybe it's time to build bridges instead of breaking walls. Or maybe that's just cowardice, dressed up as moral clarity. You make your decision on a cold winter morning. Request reassignment to Civilian Infrastructure Division. The response takes 3 weeks. You continue work while waiting, finishing Unit 10's final assembly, training its crew, documenting everything meticulously. If you're leaving, you'll leave the work in perfect order. Finally, the response arrives. The Duke approves your transfer to the Civil Engineering Bureau,
with commendation for your military service. You're assigned to a bridge construction project in the Eastern Province, far from the capital, far from the workshops, far from siege warfare. It feels like escape and exile combined. Master Zhou hosts a small farewell gathering, just the core workshop team. Feng, Liu, old Shen, who's now fully retired but still visits. Others you've worked with for years. There's no grand ceremony, no official speeches, just craftsmen drinking together, reminiscing about projects and disasters and triumphs. You're doing the right thing, Feng tells you quietly. Or maybe the wrong thing, for the right reasons. Either way, you deserve peace. Liu is less philosophical. You've earned rest from this bloody business. Build your bridges. Help people cross rivers instead of crossing enemy walls. The Eastern Province is beautiful in spring when you arrive. Rolling hills, wide rivers, small villages surrounded by rice paddies. Your bridge project spans a major tributary. The current bridge is an aging rope and wood structure that washes out every flood season. Your job is to design and build a permanent stone arch bridge, something that will last centuries. The engineering principles are similar to what you know. Stress, load distribution, material strength. But the goal is opposite. Instead of breaking structures, you're creating them. Instead of calculating how much force breaks stone, you calculate how much force stone can bear. It's the same mathematics, inverted. It feels right, in a way military engineering never did. The work is slower, less urgent. Nobody's threatening you with execution if the bridge falls. Nobody's dying based on whether your calculations are precise. You're just building something useful for ordinary people who need to cross a river. The bridge takes 2 years to complete. 2 years of careful work, quarrying stone, calculating arch curves, training stonemasons in techniques you developed during siege engineering. The arch supports must distribute weight perfectly or the bridge fails. The keystone must be cut exactly right or the whole structure is unstable. It's precision work, demanding all your skills. But unlike trebuchet construction, mistakes here don't kill people. They just mean redoing the work. The pressure is entirely different. When the bridge is finished, you stand on it watching villagers cross, farmers hauling produce to market, merchants with their goods, children running across laughing, an elderly couple walking slowly, the husband helping his wife who moves with difficulty. Ordinary people going about ordinary lives, made slightly easier because you built something useful. It's not dramatic. There's no victory celebration, just a bridge where there wasn't one before. But standing there, watching life flow across your creation, you feel more satisfied than you ever felt watching walls crumble. Word spreads about your work. Other provinces request bridge designs, irrigation systems, mill improvements. You travel, consult, design, teach. You train local engineers in your methods, sharing knowledge freely, unlike the military's paranoid secrecy. You discover you're good at teaching, patient, clear, able to explain complex principles simply. You take on apprentices, young people excited about building useful things. They remind you of yourself at 19, before US City, before you understood the cost of success. You try to teach them not just engineering, but ethics, the importance of safety, the responsibility that comes with knowledge, the need to think about consequences beyond immediate technical problems. Whether they'll listen, you don't know. But you try. 5 years after leaving military engineering, you receive an unexpected visitor. Master Zhou, now 73, travels to see you at your current project. An irrigation system for a drought-prone region. He's aged noticeably, moves slowly, but his mind is sharp as ever. He tells you the engineering treatise you co-authored has been officially sanctioned and is being copied for distribution to engineering schools being established by the Duke. Knowledge is being formalized, preserved, taught. Your decision to leave, Master Joe says during dinner. I thought at the time it was waste of talent. I was wrong. You're doing more good building bridges than you ever did building siege weapons. And the treatise might outlast all of us, teaching ethics along with techniques. That matters. It's the closest Master Joe has ever come to admitting moral doubt about his own life's work. You sit together in comfortable silence. Two engineers who chose different paths through the same impossible problems. 10 years after US City, the wars are still raging. States rise and fall. New weapons appear. Someone invented an even larger trebuchet that can throw stones 400 paces. The arms race continues without you. Sometimes you hear reports. This city fell. That fortress was destroyed. Engineers you trained are building military machines. The cycle perpetuates. It bothers you less than it once did. You made your choice. You can't control what others do with knowledge. What you can control is your own work, your own contribution. And your contribution now is irrigation canals, bridges, grain storage systems, mills that grind wheat more efficiently, small things that help small numbers of people. It's not glorious. History books won't record your bridges the way they'll record the siege of US City. But farmers who don't lose crops to drought because of your irrigation design, they'll remember. Villagers who can cross rivers safely because of your bridges, they'll benefit. That has to be enough. You're 30 years old now. You've established a small private engineering firm with 3 junior partners, former apprentices who've developed into skilled engineers in their own right. You take projects across 3 provinces, building reputation for solid work and fair dealing. You've married a merchant's daughter who manages the business side of the firm better than you ever could. You have a young daughter who loves watching you work, who asks endless questions about why stones stay up in arches and how water wheels turn. You try to explain in ways she can understand. You think about what kind of world she'll grow up in. Still a world at war, probably. But maybe also a world with better bridges, better infrastructure, knowledge being preserved and taught, rather than hoarded and weaponized. Small improvements in small corners. That's all any single person can really contribute. Master Joe dies that winter, peacefully in his sleep, according to the message you receive. You travel to the capital for the funeral. The military gives him full honors. He was, after all, the father of Chu siege warfare. Generals praise his genius. The Duke commends his service. Nobody mentions the moral questions he struggled with, the doubts that kept him awake at nights. That was private, between him and his conscience. You're one of only a dozen civilians at the ceremony, greatly outnumbered by military officials. After the formal rituals, you visit the old workshop compound. It's much expanded now. Multiple buildings, dozens of engineers working on various weapons projects. You don't go inside. You just stand at the gates for a moment, remembering Chen's scream when the prototype collapsed, remembering Wei's crushed body, remembering the wall at US City crumbling, remembering all of it. Then you turn away and walk back toward your inn. The past is finished. The work continues. 20 years after you first entered Workshop 7 as a nervous 19-year-old apprentice, you're a recognized master of civilian engineering. Your bridges span rivers across 4 provinces. Your irrigation systems have brought water to thousands of acres of farmland. The engineering firm you founded employs 40 people. You've trained 27 apprentices, each now practicing engineers in their own right. Your treatise on engineering ethics and techniques is required reading in the formal engineering schools that have been established. You're 40 years old, successful by any reasonable measure. The wars continue. They always continue. The Warring States period shows no signs of ending. Chu and Qin still fight. New weapons appear regularly, some based on principles you discovered decades ago, others representing genuinely new innovations. You hear about them, but don't involve yourself. That's not your work anymore. Occasionally, former military engineers visit, telling you about current projects, trying to lure you back with promises of resources and prestige. You always decline, politely. You made your choice long ago. You don't regret it. Not exactly. Some nights, you still think about US City. About whether there was any possible path where you could have refused the work, stepped away before the wall fell. Probably not. You were 19, ambitious, brilliant with mathematics and naive about consequences. That combination was always going to lead where it led. But you did eventually step away. That matters. You've spent twice as many years building as you spent destroying. The balance doesn't erase anything. Wei is still dead. US City still fell. Thousands still died in sieges made more efficient by your innovations. The moral debt doesn't disappear. But the balance matters nonetheless. You look at your 2 children. Your daughter is now 15, already showing engineering aptitude. And your son is 7, fascinated by water wheels and mills. You look at the junior engineers in your firm, learning to build carefully and ethically. You look at the bridges standing across rivers, the irrigation channels carrying water to fields, the granaries that keep communities fed. Small things, unglamorous things. But they add up over time, life by life, village by village. This is your legacy now. Not the weapon that changed ancient warfare forever, though history will probably remember you for that. Your true legacy is quieter. Knowledge shared. Apprentices trained. Structures built to help rather than harm. A small insistence that engineering can serve life instead of death. It's not redemption. You don't believe in redemption for what you helped create. But it's something. On cold nights when memory keeps you awake, remembering empty eyes and falling walls, it's something to hold on to. Small but real. Built to last.